Hello, everyone. My name is Josh, and this is Discourse on Radio GBX, a little politics debate show that we're starting up about to showcase the different viewpoints and on various issues around the world and in our community. So again, my name is Josh, and I'm here with three panelists. So I've got my liberal panelist, James.
Hi, my name is James Harris. I'm the liberal panelist, as Josh just mentioned. I'm a dual major in political science and democracy and justice studies. I'm a junior student here at UW Green Bay and one of the co-chairs of the College Democrats.
All right. And then going to my socialist panel, Stan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dane. I am a junior here at UWGB, and I am majoring in political science and environmental policy. And I am currently the president and leader of Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS.
All right. And then lastly, but not least, my conservative panelist, Isaac.
Hey, well, thank you, Josh, for having us on your show. Again, like you said, my name is Isaac. I am a senior at GB studying political science. Outside of school right now, I'm hoping to attend law school next.
What kind of law would you want to practice specifically?
Well, I currently work in a variety of, in an office that offers a variety of types of law. Among them are immigration, family, criminal, among others. And really, any one of those I find fascinating and I would be interested in.
Cool. And I guess I should introduce myself. So yeah, I'm Josh. I'm a communication major with a minor in political science. And I'm the production director and news director for Radio GBX, and I am a senior. So just a little bit of introduction there. But all right, so going into our first topic, just kind of starting, it's both a local topic, but also kind of a national topic, the 2024 elections, because here in Wisconsin, tomorrow, we have an election, and like early voting's over, so now this is the big actual election. So there's school board races, there's city council races, there's referendums, and there's also the presidential primaries, which are essentially over, but they're still, they're still active. So basically, first off, I'm just gonna start off by saying, so Joe Biden and Donald Trump, both the president and the former president, are the presumptive nominees of both the Democrat and Republican parties. So how are we feeling about that? I'm going to go to James first.
I think on one hand, I always kind of knew that it was going to be those two. Like, sitting presidents usually run for re-election. Donald Trump it felt like he declared in 2021, but it was always going to be these two. At the same time, I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't really feel very inspired by either of these candidates, but you get what you get. And I guess in a way that can kind of make the choice easier, because I think most people this election are going to be voting based on which candidate they dislike more rather than which candidate they actually like.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it's not really, this person has these policies that is like, who do I like the least, or who do I dislike the least? Yeah, that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's less policy, more just who doesn't make me want to like throw up. Is that a good way of putting it?
I think that's a good way of putting it, because when I wasn't that politically involved when I voted for Biden the first time. But I kind of voted for Biden so we'd have a president that, in my opinion, wouldn't make me stressed out about what the president is doing every day. He's kind of like a return to normalcy candidate, which is, I would personally argue, that's definitely a step up from Donald Trump. But on the flip side, that's also not the kind of candidate that's particularly inspiring or is going to accomplish a lot of progressive things.
Mm-hmm. Dan, how are you feeling about our choices in 2024?
Yeah, Josh, I'm feeling pretty unenthusiastic, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm not an electoral supporter, I guess, especially when it comes to president. I really think that local elections and the like matter a lot more, and you can your voice is going to count a lot more in local elections. I do definitely agree with James. It's kind of disappointing, especially being in progressive circles. It's disappointing to to have the two options that we have. And, you know, we kind of knew that Trump was going to run. And the Democrats, what was frankly quite disappointing to me was the lack of opponents or the lack of a primary, so to speak, that they're having. You know, they kind of just put all their eggs in the basket with Biden, and we're like, this is your choice, and this is what you're going to have to deal with. And I think they did it because the logic was he beat him once, he can do it again. But you know, we'll see. It's not really, in my opinion, and a lot of the my friends and peers, it's not looking too hot for the Biden campaign. So well, I'm sure we'll talk more about that later on. But
All right, and then Isaac, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'd like to speak from, I guess, two different angles from what I see. You know, and I see this from students and from the general population in the U.S. as a whole. But one thing I do see is exactly what James and Dane just said a moment ago, that there's a lot of, I guess, dislike for the candidates that we do have, or at least the front runners in Donald Trump and then Joseph Biden. But then I also see a strong portion within the Republican Party that is very optimistic about a Trump campaign heading into the 2024 election. And I do see that many of these Trump supporters are particularly looking forward to a Trump-Biden rematch. And I do think that many Trump supporters are seeing that as a positive, hoping that it'll go this time reverse, going in the favor of Trump. So, you know, as much as I'm not a big fan of the rematch personally, I do think the United States has a lot better and a lot more to offer in the highest political position in the country. But I do look forward to seeing what will happen as November nears.
James.
So yeah, I agree with, I've seen some of the stuff you've seen, Isaac. Yeah, I definitely, because I don't just consume liberal media. I try and make sure I understand things I disagree with. And I definitely see that optimism about a Trump-Biden rematch. But I also think Biden and Trump are candidates that kind of have the opposite problem. So you have Trump, who really, he is the best candidate there is at inspiring their base. But he is so, for lack of a better term, he's so committed to inspiring his base that Trump kind of turns off moderates. And then Biden is almost incredibly, he's pretty moderate, very middle of the road kind of candidate. And the Democratic Party base, at times it feels like just tolerates him. But that, on the flip side, it puts him in a good position to steal a lot of moderate votes or are leaning votes that don't like Trump. So I don't think Biden would win against any candidate except Trump, and nobody can predict the future. We'll have to wait till November to see what happens, but I'm optimistic that he's going to yank enough moderate votes to probably carry it.
Yeah, and just like, because Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee solely because, well, at first because Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, former UN ambassador, dropped out and she was the last remaining major candidate. And then Donald Trump obviously crossed the delegate threshold. But in several states since Nikki Haley dropped out, she's been getting like upwards of 10% to like even 20% of the vote. Like, and people are bringing that up as saying like there's like a contingent of the Republican primary electorate that is dissatisfied with having Trump as the candidate and are voting for Nikki Haley against him, and same with in the Democrat primary, less for a candidate and more for like the uninstructed, uncommitted, et cetera, kind of delegation. So there's definitely opposition in both parties to their frontrunners.
Dan, I saw you running the non-committed table or something like that. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I know you're involved with that.
For sure, yeah. So it was voting uninstructed is what it's called for Wisconsin. So as I'm sure many of you have seen, for the Democratic primaries, Biden has lost a significant amount of votes in states like Minnesota, and Michigan to uncommitted. In Wisconsin, we don't have uncommitted; it's uninstructed. Basically means the same thing. So the way that I've been kind of describing it is it's not a vote for Trump by any means. You know, my organization would never support that. It's primarily a way of just signaling to the Biden campaign that they messed up and that, you know, you don't feel represented, that you might be a progressive individual that, you know, just has fallen out of favor with Biden. And it's something that really resonated with me because last year, like if you would have asked me last year, I would have ran defense for Biden all day. I would have, you know, told you about the Inflation Reduction Act and all of that. And, you know, since basically the fall, we've seen, you know, his numbers plummeting. And this is kind of just a way of letting him know that he needs to change. Otherwise, he's at risk of potentially, you know, losing the election.
Isaac.
So I do have a question. You know, one thing I've seen is as there's I guess, you know, okay, back in, you know, 2020, we had a lot of people very interested in what Biden had to offer the United States. And you were just describing many people within the president's own party falling away and just kind of losing esteem for what they thought they were going to get with the president. And I'm curious if this push for the uncommitted vote would take away even more support from Biden that would then fuel the Trump campaign. You know, and obviously as someone who is conservative, that is something that I would see as an opportunity if that were the case. But I'm interested in your take on what the implications of that uncommitted vote could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely think, I mean, there's a lot of people that are more progressive that are not going to vote at all and are merely just voting uninstructed in the primaries for solidarity's sake, for what's going on in Gaza. But then there also is a large constituency of people that are going to vote uninstructed, and if nothing changes, are still going to most likely vote for Biden. But, you know, I see mentioned on here as well, this election is very strange. I feel like we have way more third-party candidates, especially on the progressive side of the aisle. You know, you got Cornel West, you have Claudia and Karina, you have Cenk Uygur, right? So you have all these progressives that are running, and then it does tie into the classic notion of, you know, is voting third party going to secure Trump an election? I think that a lot of people in the progressive sphere are just so fed up, quite honestly, with Biden that they are willing to take the risk potentially of having Trump in office. I've spoken to people directly that have said that having Trump back in office again might potentially, you know, wake people up. And it's obviously a sad thing that's what it has to come to. But so, yeah, there definitely is a possibility of that happening. It depends on the person. But I think a lot of the people that are voting uninstructed are just doing it for solidarity.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into our next point is the third-party candidates, because obviously, yeah, you mentioned Cornel West. You have the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Is that the? Yep. Yeah, that one. And then obviously you have people like RFK Jr. and you have the Libertarian candidates, the Green Party, and no labels. That's possibly going to be running a candidate. They seem to kind of not really know what they want to do with that. So what do you think the overall impact of third parties is going to be? And then kind of like, is there a benefit for voting third party? I know you like kind of talked about kind of the progressive angle, but maybe just in general, because like RFK Jr. I think is polling at least at 10% nationwide, which is hasn't really happened since Ross Perot ran in the 90s. So I'll go to James first.
Some of this would probably be a discussion for a different time, but I really wish that third-party candidates were a viable option. I wish we had ranked choice or some system besides first past the poll, because the system we have now is, you get the R or the D. Like, there are not very many candidates that run as independents, and even the ones that are independent usually caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats. So, they're, like Bernie Sanders is not really an independent. He's an extra spicy Democrat. But these third-party candidates, I think what they do is, I think all they really accomplish is pulling votes from whatever candidate is closest to their ideology. Like Cornel West will pull leftist votes. RFK Jr., I think he's going to pull right-wing votes for people that can't stand Trump. Like, there's this big push by the Trump campaign to paint him as a leftist, but I've never met a leftist who took him seriously. So I suspect he's going to pull votes from Trump, but I can't tell the future. It's only one way to find out.
Yeah, I want to add, because like with the polling, I've seen, like, if you have just Trump versus Biden, it's like very neck and neck. Like, I think Trump is a little ahead, but Biden's like really close behind. But then when you add like RFK Jr. and then it shifts more in favor of Trump. But then if you put Cornel West, it's a whole thing. It's very fascinating. But Dane, you.
Yeah. I mean, I generally agree with James on that, especially with RFK stealing more votes from the right. I mean, he's going on like Jordan Peterson's podcast, and most people that are progressive are not going to vote for somebody most likely that's on Jordan Peterson's podcast. But then also, I think that the role of a third-party candidate in our system, I think the third-party candidate can kind of signal to the other two major parties the direction that some of the nonpartisan people want to go. Like you saw in 2020, Andrew Yang was like the big independent third party, and he was really pushing things like UBI, which have now become a staple in some states and on some platforms. And you saw kind of the Tea Party contingent of the Republicans early on, like in the Obama years. So I think I definitely agree with James that it can steal votes from whatever side, but I think it also just lets people and lets the respective platforms know, like, this is what a lot of people want on each side of the independent spectrum.
Isaac, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, I'd first like to just echo and put emphasis on a couple things that James and Dave just said a moment ago. So I do think that third-party candidates often, and the result of them being on a ballot is just taking away from the major candidates. With that said, I do want to also echo what Dane said about third-party candidates showing the direction of their of where their party or the party that they're closest to, the direction of where politics is headed for that particular party. I think a perfect example is Bernie Sanders. The past few presidential elections, Biden ended up taking more policies that were further to the left than was the Democrat norm, particularly in 2020, after Bernie Sanders had wide success throughout the entire United States. But then another thing I would like to add too is, particularly with Robert Kennedy Jr., is his unique ability in this election to gain favorable ratings. When I first saw his announcement of his candidacy, my immediate reaction was, one, I thought it was cool to see a Kennedy back, especially after Ted Kennedy passed away. I believe it was close to 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first reaction. But then I didn't think he would last long, and I didn't think he would have much success at all. But what has already been pointed out is he's taking a good 10% of the vote. And I think where most of that is coming from the Republican Party, I think a decent amount, numbers I see here from Reuters .com is he's taking 40% of his vote from the Democrat Party. So I do see where it's pretty even, of course, 40%, there's, 5% off from it being 50-50, but that's still a significant portion from both parties. And I do think could have implications coming into November.
Mm-hmm. James, do you have something you want to say?
So, kind of agree, but a little bit of disagree on the third-party candidates being what the direction the party is headed. Because I feel like these third-party candidates are the directions the base of the party would like to head if they got their way. But that's not necessarily how neutral or third-party people are going to vote, because the vast majority of third-party people are not on the far left or the far right, like being really loud and raising a stink. They're somewhere in the middle, and they feel like both parties are crazy. But they usually don't talk about that. They sit there and they're quiet. Nobody notices them until, election night comes and somebody realizes the turnout numbers are all wrong. But, their power is located in somewhere closer to the middle, which is, and I think mainstream candidates, let me rephrase. These third-party candidates are usually like in a position that's slightly more extreme than the establishment, rather than like a centrist third-party candidate. And I think if you ran a centrist third-party candidate, not that I agree with centrism, I think it's a very lazy position to take, to say that both sides have a point and the correct solution is always compromise. But if you ran a centrist third-party candidate, I think you'd be shocked at, what kind of support and turnout they got.
Mm-hmm. Kind of going off of that, but maybe like in terms of turnout. So obviously, Dane, you're kind of involved in the primary with the uninstructed, but kind of for the general, what, like at least you and James, what are your organizations going to kind of try to do to get students involved or participate in the election? So yeah, I'll go to Dane first.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, we're not really planning on doing a whole lot for the general election. As long as there's still a genocide happening in Gaza, our organization is going to be full steam ahead supporting liberation. A presidential election, albeit extremely important, it's the highest position in the land. At the end of the day, both sides have a similar stance to the current conflict that's going on. So if the genocide were to end, then we might do something. We might do something with the college Dems merely as a formality or just to boost numbers or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we don't really have anything planned, and at least until the genocide in Gaza is over with.
I haven't even started thinking about the general election, to be honest. The primary is, you can still vote, but the primary is over. We know who the nominations are going to be. I've been full send on local elections. So, I've been really focused on local elections, so I haven't really paid much attention to the big picture at all.
Isaac, do you have anything you want to add, or otherwise we can roll into our next area, which is local elections?
Hey, good choice.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump into local elections, but I guess, I personally am not within leadership among the college Republicans on campus, but I do see that they've been active I've seen them set up a table around campus supporting local elections, but I do assume that you'll see more of the college Republicans as we near toward November.
All right. So obviously, yes, tomorrow is the spring general election for Wisconsin. A lot of things on the ballot, namely city council. So obviously, we have a Barbara Dorff sticker in the studio, but
you'll never guess who I support.
So basically, what are we doing for local elections? And I'll start with James again.
So, okay, just to be perfectly clear, the Green Bay local, like the Green Bay Alders, they are nonpartisan events. Mm-hmm. Like, the candidates do not have an official identification with either party. But, everybody's got a lean one way or another. And myself and the college Dems, we've been doing a decent amount of work supporting Barb Dorf. Been doing some canvassing on campus. We've set up some tables, stuff like that. I've been door knocking a few times. Have also been out knocking doors for John Shelton, who's running in another district. And I think local elections are the most important. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you need to get out and vote in local elections, because you can vote for who you want as president or United States senator, but the federal politics are so detached that your vote has very little impact as compared to local elections. Like, the three of us could go downtown and protest in front of City Hall for a week, and we might not get it, but we can, a couple people working together can pretty easily get attention for an issue. Like, local elections, there's a couple hundred votes. Like, you have the power to literally go out there and change something by yourself or with a couple friends. And it's also the things that affect your life the most. Like, a thing Barb Dorf is running on is connecting campus and community, because there's a feeling on campus, which I can't speak to myself because I live off campus, but I've talked to a lot of people and they feel like the campus is really disconnected from the city and there's not good transportation options, and that's something that need to be improved. And that is an issue that you can change on a local level by going out and voting.
Dan.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with James, and I kind of voiced it earlier. I think that local elections are extremely important, especially because a lot of these candidates are coming from neighborhoods. You get people that are running for Senate or president or whatever that sometimes aren't even from the state that they're running for. And, so people in city council, it's obviously a requirement that, you have to be from the neighborhood that you're running in, which is super cool because then, you can connect a lot better with your constituency. SDS as an organization is non-electoral, so we're not really supporting or endorsing any candidate. I know I personally have been working on the Barbara Dorf team as well. I met Barb actually at a College of Dems meeting, and immediately, fell in love with the personality. I'm not a huge fan of politicians typically, and I guess city council is not really technically a politician. I guess we might get into a dispute over that, but So, and there's a lot of really progressive ideals that are being ran for in city council. There's union leaders and things like that would be awesome to have at the local level.
Yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, so talking about the importance of local elections, I won't go into that because both James and Dane eloquently said just that, and it is incredibly important. So I guess I'll just briefly mention another candidate running for the District 1 alderperson, and that is Jennifer Grant. So she's the opponent to Barbara Dorf, and while as James mentioned, it's a nonpartisan election, so there's not going to be the Republican or Democrat tag with either candidate. Barbara Dorf does lean to the left, and Jennifer Grant does lean to the right, and it's pretty clear in what each individual candidate has said. And it's also been clear for sure, Jennifer Grant's policies as she currently holds the position each of them are running for. But then another election I'd like to highlight as well is for the Green Bay Area Public School District. This one also is very important, impacting more than just the youth within the community, as many of the decisions go beyond and influence the greater city and the greater county that our campus is located on. And I believe there are 4 candidates for that position. two of them. I'm sorry, I don't have the names for four. Maybe James or Dane can help me out. But I do know that Alex Minot and Andrew Becker tend to be viewed as the conservative candidates. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, Dane.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. School board is of the utmost importance. And as somebody who is a lifelong Green Bay resident, I can really resonate with that. I mean, I went through the Green Bay public school district, and I actually had Alex Minnow as a teacher, believe it or not. So that was kind of interesting for me to see that he was running. I've had a couple teachers run. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing that, I'm really glad you actually brought that up, because yeah, school board is, I mean, these are children. These are the next generation of people, of brilliant minds that are going to be influenced by who's on the school board. And you mentioned Becker and Minnow are traditionally kind of viewed as the conservative candidates. I will say Becker, from reading prior, was, I think, endorsed by both parties, which, again, I think school board is also a nonpartisan, in quotes, position. I know Cooley was oftentimes viewed as the more progressive candidate endorsed by the Democratic Party and also the AFL-CIO. And then there is also another candidate, Paul Boucher, who's kind of a bit of a wild card, I guess, to say the least. But don't know much about him. But
yeah. Anyone else want to jump in on school board or?
I don't live in Green Bay, so I know nothing about the school board.
That's fair. I do think we have some referendums on the ballot too. I think one is in relation to outside influence or money in elections. I think it's specifically kind of related to Facebook. And then I forget what the other one is. I'll look it up. But how are we thinking about do we care about the referendums? Are they important? Do you think they'll pass? Or what do you know about them?
To tell the truth, I know very little personally.
Dane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a whole lot besides reading through them. I think from my experience, they do a good job of trying to make the referendums not sound super partisan. Because when I was reading the one of them, I was like, okay, I can see why I would support this, and I can see why I wouldn't support it. And then, yeah, I did hear about Facebook and the alleged Zucker bucks. I'm not super familiar with those, but.
James.
Yeah. So, I'm not incredibly familiar with this. I remember the controversy is something about Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook donated a lot of money to some areas to help run the elections, like new vote tabulating machines and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people on the left are going to vote no on them because the idea is that these aren't funds that are going to influence the way people vote. They're not being spent on ad campaigns. They're funds that are being spent to make it easier to vote. And I think anything that makes it harder to vote is voter suppression. So I'm going to vote no on those, but I'm not the most familiar with it.
Mm-hmm. And then the other referendum question is, I think, basically to specify that to be an election worker, you have to be a citizen, which that's, at least in my understanding, that's already kind of a requirement. So it's kind of a solution in search of a problem. But Dane, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I would be surprised if that's even a problem. It's one of those things, I think, where, it's much ado about nothing. Basically, you kind of more eloquently put it. But yeah, I mean, I would be curious as to know what the data, if there is any, behind that. Is that a common problem in Wisconsin or in other states? So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that referendum.
Yeah, if I can jump in there.
Yeah.
Based on, I guess my lack of seeing anything, I haven't seen anything come up that actually says, okay, this has been an issue for a long time, or I haven't seen any large examples come up. But I guess I'll just point out that that this would clarify it in the state constitution. Mm-hmm. I believe, based off of my understanding of most referendums have to do with the Constitution. of the state. So
yeah, they're
it's
just amending the Constitution.
Exactly. It's just adding an amendment to say, okay, maybe this was already a practice in the state of Wisconsin before, but now we're actually making it constitutional.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these at least seem more just they're kind of trying to make a point, because obviously the state legislature is led by Republicans and has been since 2011. And the way the referendum process works, for those who don't know, you have to the referendum has to pass out of the two sessions of the legislature consecutively. So if you think about it, like these elections or these referendums deal with elections, and if it passed out of two legislatures, that would be the 2021 the 2023 legislature, and then the 2023 the present legislature. So it would have been brought up in the aftermath of the 2020 election, which obviously had a lot of controversy about the results and the processes. So do you think these are more just kind of to satisfy kind of a base that, we're doing things about elections, or is it just genuine trying to like clarify things?
Yeah, so I think what you just said, I think it does both. I think it does serve to clarify, but then it also serves to say, hey, we are doing something about this. Josh, you pointed out that there was a lot of concern about the 2020 election and potential voter fraud that many people, particularly in the Republican Party, believed happened and were very concerned about. Obviously, there was much talk of that in Arizona, Michigan, but Wisconsin was definitely one of the states that was brought up in. So both of these referendums do touch on that very issue. Are our elections safe? Are they actually the votes of the people? And are there influences outside? So that first referendum we mentioned, that's question number 1 that's going to be on your ballot, has to do with the private funds, and in this case, what instigated was the funds coming from the Meta, is he CEO, but Mark Zuckerberg. And the point of that referendum question is to keep outside influence from impacting. And then same with the second referendum question. Again, it's to keep the election officials to be U.S. citizens. So do I personally have the knowledge to say that these referendum questions will solve an issue, or they'll actually have great impact to keep our elections safe? I don't know. I don't know specifically what the implications will be, but I do believe that I can say that is the point of them, to bring security to elections, and I believe even more importantly, to bring confidence to voters.
Mm-hmm. James.
So right while we were on air, I looked into these a little bit more, and the first one, it turns out that the elections in Wisconsin, like Wisconsin elections, are funded by local municipalities. And depending on your municipality, it's going to be a bigger or smaller problem. But I live in a super rural area, and I know my municipality is very, very broke. So, I mean, I don't like Mark Zuckerberg. I think Facebook is one of the worst inventions that humankind has ever created. But if you want to keep him out, I think you need to provide clean funding, like have the federal government support local elections. Like that way the funding would be there. You know where it's coming from. There's not an outside influence. Like you got the Department of Elections or something whose entire job is to make sure that these, municipalities have their equipment and systems up to date. The second one, it turns out that the language in that one is vague enough that nobody is quite sure what it means, and it would require supporting legislation. The one about, where is it?
Is it the clarifying the election workers?
Yeah, the only election officials designated by law. Mm. And I'm going to oppose that just on the grounds that I don't trust the government. I don't trust government officials of any party with vague language, because vague language and ambiguous wording is how politicians do whatever they want and then justify it after the fact.
Yeah. This isn't necessarily like related to this election, but it will affect upcoming elections. So we have now 2 open assembly seats here in this area. We have Christina Shelton, who was the representative for the main kind of Green Bay area, but then we also had John Mako just today announced that he's retiring instead of seeking re-election because with the redistricting that happened after the Wisconsin Supreme Court struck down the current Wisconsin legislative maps as unconstitutional, and Tony Evers signed into law new legislative maps that John Mako and Shea Sortwell had been redistricted into the same area, the same district, and John Mako I think was going to run for the 88th district still, which was his original district, but now he's retiring. Is there any opportunity for anything there, do you guys think, or what is that like a representative? I think because Christina Shelton is obviously a Democrat, John Mako is a Republican. I don't know if I'm like making sense in what I'm trying to ask, but Dane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not like organizing or a part of any organization that's like organizing to get turnout for those. I will say I had the privilege of actually speaking with Tony Evers in earlier in the semester. Actually, he came to campus. And, someone posed the question, which has been on a lot of people's minds, quite frankly, the entire Evers administration about legalization of marijuana. And I know that was something that he specifically told me. So Tony Evers, in the off chance you're listening, you did tell me this, that once the redistricting efforts happened, that more policies like that were going to either be coming down the barrel, or they were going to just happen. So that's really, I guess my biggest hope, not necessarily that policy, but just other, policies in general, whether it have to be abortion, access, or anything like that. So.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to talk on the opening of John Mako's district. So we actually had at the past election, I believe it was 2022, a student at Green Bay run against John Mako.
Hannah Beauchamp Pope.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. And so that election was not very close. John Mako took it, and it wasn't. Hannah did a great job, running for that seat in our state assembly, but it's a solid Republican district, and as great as she did to put up a good fight, it was the resulting vote was solid Republican. So with Shea Sortwell, I don't know if we know of anyone who's announced that they will be running for that seat in particular, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it go Republican, just because it has been quite solidly Republican in the past.
Or was that so Shea Sortwell was a Republican from the 2nd district, and Mako had been redistricted into the same district, into the 2nd district, but he was going to run in the 88th district to not like run against another Republican. That if I'm
okay, was that how it was?
I think that's my understanding, is that like it was 2 Republicans against each other, because
so it would have been Mako versus
Sortwell, and then
was that okay?
So they would have the primary it out, and then whoever, and then run against presumably a Democrat in the general. If that makes sense, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, and I know the same happened in the Senate as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a number of
Senator
Republicans who are running against each other.
Yeah, no, that was exactly it, and some say that's why Senator Jacques is now running for the U.S. representative job.
That would make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, too, Mike Gallagher is going to be out in the next 20 days.
Yeah,
because he's resigning on the 19th.
Which that opens up to like discussion of federal politics, in particular in this area. But as Josh mentioned, Mike Gallagher, the current U.S. representative from the Green Bay district, is going to be out in 20 days, and elections are picking up in that direction. And over the past, I believe since 2010, that seat's been held by a Republican candidate. And I'm curious if James or Dane, if you have heard of any Democrats looking to challenge that seat as we move closer to the election.
I have not yet, but like the redistricting is going to throw a monkey wrench into everyone's plans. And, you've got all kinds of theories that say, well, we are a purple state, that says the redistricting should bring us to like a very slight Republican majority in the state assembly. That's what the theory is. We're not going to know until the election comes. I think, I spaced. What was his name? Gallagher. I find it really interesting that Mike Gallagher, when he retired, he specifically waited long enough. So it's like if you retire after April 2nd or something like that, then there isn't a temporary election to fill the seat. So he specifically waited long enough to make sure that his seat is going to sit empty until November. So there's some infighting going on there, and I hope he writes a book about it because I'd really like to know.
Yeah, there's actually an effort to expel him before the deadline, so we could hold a special election, so Republicans aren't down a seat in the House because the Republicans are already like a razor-thin majority in the House. Because I think with Gallagher, when Gallagher resigns, it'll be 217 Republicans and then 213 Democrats, and I think Democrats will be picking up a seat relatively soon, or just regaining a seat because a Democrat had retired during the term, so it would be like 214, 217 Republicans, which is kind of crazy because I don't think we've ever had that close a margin in recent memory, especially because I think it's 218 for a majority, so you're already under the requirement for a majority. I do think there are some lesser known candidates running for House right now, even before Gallagher had announced he was going to retire or even resign. I think Kristen Lyerly, who ran for one of the assembly seats in the area within the last couple of cycles, is running, but there aren't too many notable Democrats running as of yet.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of a big fan of this redistricting. Like, I'm not a fan of like any, I'm leftist, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not a fan of any party having total control of anything. Like, I want to see close elections where reasonable people have to make concessions and debate each other and, slug it out, because that's how you discover like what issues are most important and what the people really want. And, I think that's a good thing, because Wisconsin, despite, being a swing state and pretty much being purple, like we voted for a Democrat, and then we voted for Tammy Baldwin, but then our other, what's his name? The Republican senator?
Ron Johnson.
Yeah, Ron Johnson. So, we vote both ways on it, but there is no reason that our legislature should be super majority Republican. That's just not right.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have anything they want to say?
Yeah, I think James pointed out that he was in favor of much of the redistricting, and that is something that I've heard among many Democrats. It's rare to hear a Republican say that they've been in favor of the redistricting as it happened. I know going into it, some Republicans were positive, but the way it turned out, it ended up, appearing to be positive toward the left.
Well, I wouldn't expect you to be, because like, the question of fairness aside, like, there's a whole debate about districts and like area and, the urban versus rural divide and how to protect the minority opinion versus the majority opinion in land. But I wouldn't expect any right-leaning people to be happy about it, because at the end of the day, that's less people in the government that, would push right-leaning opinions. So, like, the correctness of it and your opinion and how much you like it are going to be two different things for pretty much everybody.
Right, yeah. Where if Democrats tend to, seem to be helped and gain more seats, whether it's the Assembly or the Senate, or if Republicans help their each respective party, will likely be in favor of that.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think that's all the time we have for this show. I'd like to thank all my panelists for coming on and talking about the issues. A lot of great discussion.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, yeah. No, this has been a great discussion. Great opportunity to talk about different issues that are important, and especially local issues that will directly impact everyone, hopefully, who's listening. But this has been the first episode of Discourse. Stay tuned. We'll hopefully have more episodes in the future, unless we're we're like, no, this is too much. We've gone too far, but we'll see about that. All right.
Make sure you go vote tomorrow.
Oh yes, please go vote tomorrow. It's very important that you vote. No matter if you're in with the state of Wisconsin, please go and vote. Very important. A lot of local races across the state that are very important. So, all right. I hope everyone has a good night, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.